This is Stormworks, and this ugly thing is the warpfish. And you might be thinking, why is it so ugly? Look at how ugly it is. It's awful. What does it do to deserve the name warpfish? Well, let's find out. Let's go ahead and give yourself just a little bit of trim here, and then turn it on. There we are. As always, it's a jet-powered boat. Shoof. Nice, right? This isn't really very fast, though. If you're going to call something warp, it really should be pretty fast, shouldn't it? Well, what's this on the side here? Pitch. Go underwater. Well, okay. I can do that. Okay. Now we're going some speed. This is like jet engine speed, but really, to call it a warp fish, don't you think you need to go faster than this? Well, I think we can go faster than this. What do you say, kids? Would you like to go faster? $470? That's pretty good. Raise your hands if you'd like to go faster. $625? I mean, that's like the fastest jet speed, but really, that's not really a warp speed. But this is the fastest I can go. There's no more Y to press. I don't have any more throttle to set. Whoa-ho-ho, let's go cruise by an island that we couldn't possibly have avoided if we were 2 degrees off. What's this button over here that says go fast? Why is it beeping? What's going on? Why are there plants? There is no way of knowing just how fast this boat is going. Is it raining? Is it snowing? Why are these random plants showing? Turns out that if you go above 1,200 kilometers an hour, the game freaks out. You have to look at the map fairly regularly, or the game will crash. Plants show up for no reason. And if you try and take the ship back to the docks, it will go without you, and you will die. You have no idea how hard it was to get this thing up to 1,700, because at 1,200, things stop working. And by things, I mean friction and control surfaces, those kinds of things. As you can see, these plants are well and truly just bugged. There's no ground for them to be on. There's no reason for them to be in existence. This is just the sort of thing that happens when you break the speed of light in this game. Now, I've built a couple of prototypes of this that could get up to 1,200, but at that point, everything destabilizes, and it becomes really, really hard to go any faster. So just to show you, the last version of the warpfish was this one, which is, I think, my third version. But this version of the warpfish could only go to about 1,400 before it would destabilize catastrophically. And if we look at what I did instead, this version of the warpfish doesn't have any tail, and it has full-sized control surfaces. Whereas this warpfish has these teeny tiny control surfaces and these long tails. And if you'd like to know just how tight the wiggle room is here, this little tail fin piece, this thing here, if it's 1 notch further forward or 1 notch further back, the ship crashes. So this was a little bit rough to build, but it was a lot of fun to figure out. It turns out that the glitch is, if you go underwater, the physics of drag are not correctly calculated. But that's only true of hull. It's not true of control surfaces. So as you go faster, obviously the control surfaces are going to divert you more because there's more water rushing across them, but they're also the only thing causing you drag. So that makes it so that when we're at the top speed, these things are frantically wobbling as fast as they can to keep us as even as possible. They're going as hard as possible between 0.00001 and negative 0.00001, because if they tilt any more than that, the ship destabilizes and you die. You probably die anyway. That was a pretty lucky run. Hitting that 1,700 mark frequently involves dying. It's hard to dodge islands. You can't see them. There are a lot of pieces to make this work. Feel free to just download it and play it if you don't care about the pieces, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about them. There's nothing on this ship that is fluff except for the bed. I put in a bed just in case I got injured and had to sleep. Everything else is absolutely necessary, including exactly this amount of empty space. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of ship this is. There's no wasted space here. So let's go over it. I've got these 6 jets, water jets, in the back. They're powered by the main pair of jet engines in the middle of the boat here. Let's go ahead and use a cutter. There we are. So I've got these 2 jet engines. They do most of the powering of these 6 water jet engines. Now, you might be thinking that the jet engines should provide a fair amount of thrust, even though they're stuck inside a room. And that glitch does work, but they only provide about 200 kilometers an hour at max. So that means that when we're up at 1700, it's mostly these. It's like 1500 of this. And then the jets are just there for a little bit of added flavor, I guess. It might be possible to do this more efficiently, but I'm using a glitch right now that seems to be taking advantage of a couple features that exist in the water jets specifically. I tried it with a couple of other kinds of engines, and water jets are by far the most efficient. And the big part of that is that the water jet's exhaust power is apparently equal to the pressure of the intake, the fluid intake, times the amount of force that's being applied. Well, the jet engines produce a tremendous amount of force, and going 1,400 kilometers an hour produces a tremendous amount of pressure on those intake pipes. So, in short, this thing gets faster the faster it gets because of this particular engine type. I've also got these fans. These fans are brakes. They keep us from going too bonkers, but they're not really very useful in this ship except for braking. In ships that are on the surface, they can keep you on the surface, but these things, they wouldn't even hold a candle to half a degree of diversion off of these control surfaces. They're simply there to provide braking services. And I probably could have just put in like small electric motors instead, but I got used to these and I like how they sound. So these fins all have their own role. This red fin controls the roll of the ship. So if the ship is tilting left and right, the red fins bring it back to an even keel. The orange fins control the pitch of the ship to keep the ship as flat as possible. And these yellow fins control the dive of the ship to try and keep it a certain distance under the water. That way, because you only get this advantage if you are completely under the water. I think what happens is the way that it simulates drag is, as far as I can tell, it uses the bounding boxes of these buoyancy rooms. Because these buoyancy rooms are each calculated as like a buoyancy volume. And apparently if they're all below water, they stop causing drag, which is kind of an interesting idea. And I might try and create some boats that have entirely underwater buoyancy chambers and just see what happens. But the idea here is that you have to be underwater for this to work. This ship goes like no speed at all if it's on the surface. And so those sets of fins act to keep, this one keeps it underwater, this one keeps it flat, and this one keeps it flat on another axis. This little red fin in the back, it keeps it from skewing. So I've got a heading sensor, and if this heading sensor shows that we're skewing left or skewing right, this will skew the opposite way. It's good for helping you turn without overturning, and it's also good for keeping you at not oscillating at high speeds, because the ship will take little buffets that make it steer left or steer right, and that keeps it nice and even. It's still very dangerous to steer this ship very hard. Now, these jets are your personal control, and they're the only thing you control as the pilot. Your left and right are geared to these jets, and your up and down are geared to these jets. They have no connection to these surfaces. And that's actually quite safe, because the propellant that gets spewed out of the back doesn't create any drag. So the ship does not have any multiplicative factors when you're trying to turn. the jet will very gently nudge you up or down or left or right without causing you to skew. And that was really, really great. But unfortunately, you can't use it for high-speed automated controls because they don't respond very fast. So by the time they've finished, turning on their leftwards push, you've already exploded. So that's why we have to use control surfaces for the automation. Up front, we've got some lights and a control surface. It's very, very basic stuff. But inside this ship is a lot more complexity than you might think. Just to show you, I am actually using composite data in order to try and control this shit. I spent 2 days trying to figure out how the heck I could get this ship to properly accelerate, because this is a ship where if your control surfaces are a little bit too aggressive, you die. But if they're not aggressive enough, you float to the surface and you don't get any speed. And balancing that was incredibly challenging. The other warp fish I've got is a much less elegant ship. So let's go ahead and save this as the warp fish 2, and I'll just call up that one, and I can just show you the difference in how this works. This warp fish has the exact same setup, but it uses these full-sized control surfaces, which are completely useless past 1200. It's got these doors that lock, which I think were probably still a better idea than what I ended up going with, but it doesn't really matter either way. And the logic for this is a little bit more severe. The whole ship is filled with logic. That is all makeshift bullshit logic that I don't think really ever worked. The only space where this has a lot of logic is right here in the back, and that's not nearly as much as the previous ship. So, it's pretty tame. But in order to do that, I had to write a whole bunch of custom firmware. So, you've got a bunch of specific things like the high-speed altitude dive control, the high-speed pitch control, the ship state compiler, these sorts of things, and then some stuff for pumping water out. That was a really fun build. If you have this game, I do recommend you try the warp fish. It's a lot of fun because you never know when you're going to violently hit something and explode, which is how I think I will finish this particular episode. Let's go ahead and run into some stuff. Now, how long this ship will last, I don't know, because there are any of a number of exploits that could be fixed, which would cause it to simply stop doing the things it does. If they fix the jet engines, then we won't be able to use the jet engine exploit. If they fix the dive exploit, then we won't really be very fast underwater. So, if you've got an interest in this sort of thing, get it while it's hot, because it could be, in a week, you'll end up not being able to use it anymore. Let's go ahead and take a look. Where are the islands at? Oh, we're not traveling towards any islands. Let's turn left here. How's that? Better. All right, let's hit some islands. Currently, we're in slow mode. Shall we hit the islands while we're going fast? Let's hit the islands while we're going fast. Oh, we've entered the Twilight Zone. I don't think the islands are going to spawn in. Holy crap, the islands didn't even spawn in. Okay, well that's what happens if you lose control of the ship. You actually break your neck due to the deceleration. You're always going to want to shut your ship off when that happens, just by hitting 1. But the problem is that you'll probably dive to the bottom of the ocean, regardless of how far down it is. Oh. We're pretty badly damaged. Shall we go back to base? I'm sorry that I couldn't ram anything for you. Feel free to grab the ship and ram stuff yourself. It's very entertaining. You'll frequently go literally a kilometer straight up just from bumping into something. This sort of exploit is just so much fun to play with, and I really enjoyed making this. But man, it was rough. It would be fun to see someone try and take it over the 2,000 kph limit. That would be really something to see. I can't imagine how careful you'd have to balance everything. That would be a real challenge. Anyway, have a nice one.